on NIST CMMC 2.0 compliance, faster, better, more cost effective. Appreciate you all joining us here today. What we will cover is a little bit of an introduction. We'll talk a little bit about the current compliance requirements under DFARS, which many of you and all of you are very well aware of, where they are at with the CMMC process, and really how you can leverage technology like that provided by SureShield to help you streamline and make this process of compliance that much easier for you. We will show a brief demonstration of some of the product offerings that can help you meet these compliance requirements and, more importantly, secure your environment. We'll take questions, and then for those of you who are participating today, we will make an offer for you to actually trial out our solutions. We typically get a lot of folks who want to do that to help them with this process, and then very cost effectively become clients of SureShield as well. I am Tom Leahy. I'm the head of sales and business development with SureShield. I have been in the compliance and risk and security field for close to 35 years. And I have joined with me on the call today our CTO, Chandi Bilagu, who will help answer any questions that you may have. As mentioned, please use the Q&A portion of Zoom to direct any questions you may have during the presentation. And we'll make sure we try to address all of those. And then lastly, for those of you who are participating, just as a reiteration, you will get copies of this content as well as the webinar recording as well. So many of you who are on here, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time regurgitating what DFARS is and what the NIST requirements are. We've heard a lot about it, but generally, DFARS was really focused around safeguarding the covered defense information and cyber, information. We've had a lot of incidents in the past of suppliers and providers that were hacked. There continues to be much more and a more heightened hostile cyber attacks that are taking place. And of course, protecting this very critical infrastructure of ours, the Department of Defense back in, I believe, 2017, or even before that, introduced what they call the NIST 800-171 assessment controls. And really, it is a framework for helping protect critical infrastructure and critical data. And it requires that anyone who is contracting with the DoD, whether they are a prime or they're a supplier, that they conduct a NIST 800-171 assessment. They implement that, and then they provide their scores. So there's a scoring algorithm that needs to get submitted to the SPRS, the Supplier Performance Risk System. And that they will also provide access to their facilities if the government wants to come in or the DoD wants to come in to look at that and conduct those. And we know that that is now moving to a more planned, structured process where, under the auspices of CMMC, rather than just submitting an assessment score that's required today, they will be moving to what we would call a third-party audit, someone who's going to come independently to audit your organization, particularly if you are handling what they call CUI, controlled unclassified information, things that are continued to be critical. And again, why was this put into place? Obviously, we've had a lot of theft of IP from foreign agents and governments. A big need for providers to improve their cyber hygiene, and really a need for a more validated process. What they have at least found today is, while the assessment score requirement has some effect, there have been issues of organizations submitting scores that may not necessarily reflect their true cyber hygiene. And as such, they are moving forward with the new CMMC program. Now, they've also decided that that new rule is probably going to be evaluated a little bit more. Understandably, the government does not want to put an undue burden on some of the supplier network to comply with these processes. So they are in the process of reevaluating and finalizing what will be the final rule that will get submitted, and then what they call CMMC will be in place. Currently, and of course, we suspect that this will continue to move forward. The CMMC AB, the accreditation board, has already certified more than, I believe, 40 what they call C3PAOs. These will be organizations that will come in to conduct those assessments on suppliers that are handling CUI information. They continue to build an ecosystem of what they call registered provider organizations who are helping companies like yours get prepared and ready for this. And many of you may be seeing, I just got off the phone with someone this morning that received a letter from one of their primes saying that they needed to see their validation of their assessment scores being submitted. So they are ratcheting up even today's need and requirement for making sure that the NIST 800-171 assessment is done. And there are indications that beyond completing those today, there will be more scrutiny looking at where you stand on those scoring levels, meaning at the highest score you can get on an assessment is 110. The lowest, I believe, is a negative 184. That would mean that you don't have anything implemented or you haven't answered any of the questions. And it is, there has been indication that they will begin looking at and wanting to see scores that obviously are above the 70 to 80 area, meaning that you have a number of those controls in place. Part of that process requires you to conduct the assessment, whether you do that or you have someone else do that for you. And then under the assessment itself, supplying that to the SPRS, so submitting that data. That's also accompanied by a system security plan and what they call a plan of action and milestone report. That is basically indicating any controls that you have not implemented, but intend to implement, when you're going to do those, and how you're going to execute that. And it is understood that the new requirements are, one, going to limit the number of controls that can actually go on to a plan of action and milestone. So in the past, in theory, you could put anything on there and say when you were going to put that in place. They are now going to make sure that there's some minimum hygienes that you'll have to have in place that cannot go on a POA&M. And they also are going to be more scrutinous around the time frame in which you will put those in place. And as of today, this affects over 300,000 providers in the DoD, or what they call the DIB. So, what do you need to meet the current requirements? Obviously, the preparation and ongoing oversight is going to require that you audit your organization against these controls. One of the control requirements that are in there are ongoing what they call vulnerability scans. Doing a scan of your network to identify where you may have holes or you may have high-risk areas within your network, and to make sure that you are conducting on a regular basis processes for identifying, stratifying the risk of those, and then more importantly, remediating those processes. As well as having tools in place that can identify and demonstrate your protection of any controlled unclassified information that you have, where you have it, how you're protecting it, how you're putting that in place. It also requires a defined policy and procedure related to CMMC, related to NIST. And as we mentioned before, that you will have to submit this data to the SPRS today, and then in the future, working with that as part of an assessment process, should your organization have to go through that. So if you have not done that today, you should be doing that currently. And before we get into how we can help you with this, we're just going to take a brief poll. Appreciate if you can go ahead and answer these, and just asking the audience here. One, have you, conducted an assessment and submitted that? And two, if so, are you continually updating that? And we'll take just a minute to let folks go ahead and answer those questions. And I'm seeing roughly, I would say 50% of the participants have actually conducted, close to 50% have conducted an assessment. A lot of them have not. And actually, I would encourage you, if you have not, you need to be preparing your company to get that done, because you will be seeing more requirements, at least for submitting those scores. And then really a number of you that have not necessarily updated that. And it would be a good time now to go back and take a look at that, where you stand, and making sure that anything that you have, doing a refresh of where you are with that right now. That is not that easy to do if you don't have good tools in place. And here's where SureShield can, of course, help you with that process. So what we provide is a software platform that allows you to do a number of things. One of those is to actually conduct your assessments. So we can initiate the NIST and CMMC assessment process, allow you to get, and we're going to show you really nice ways to help make this easy for you to understand how you need to look at questions, how you need to answer them. We package that with defined policies that you can either utilize for your own benefit, you can modify those policies, or you can bring those policies in to the product. And the nice thing is that they are actually linked and matched up to those controls. We have within there, we will provide you all the reporting requirements, automated reporting to submit that data, to create your assessment score, to create your SSP, your system security plan, and your plan of action and milestone report. We also have tools that a number of folks use to help meet specific control requirements, like the vulnerability scanning process. And then we also have tools in place that can help you identify where your CUI data resides, not only where it resides, but more importantly, how you can go about protecting that data and controlling how that data moves throughout your organization. And we do that under the auspices of a couple of different tools. One is called SureShield, that's for helping conduct your assessments. We have SureShield for vulnerability scanning, and we have SureShield DLP for CUI identification and data protection in terms of the movement of that data. Again, helping meet a number of those control requirements. So briefly, we will go into an overview of the product itself. And again, we felt like we didn't need to spend a lot of time today in helping understand what CMMC and NIST is. If you are a provider or a supplier to the Department of Defense in any form or fashion, as a sub, as a prime, you have to meet these requirements. And you need to be submitting this data to them. And you can be assured that with the implementation of CMMC, the continued issues around more and more hostile, cyber attacks taking place, that ratcheting up this requirement will continue to happen. So let's take a look. What we're doing right now is showing you an overview of the software that we can help you with to help meet these requirements from a compliance perspective, and of course, from, more importantly, a security perspective. So I'm in under the auspices of someone called a customer demo site. And you'll see these top three tiles are basically the components that help me with what I would call the compliance assessment processes. It's helping me understand what I'm compliant with, what I may not be compliant with, and what I have yet to answer. If I were to click into these tiles, it will take me directly into those controls. So why do you see 220? Well, we've activated and turned on for this particular customer, both the CMMC version 2 controls and the NIST 800-171. We caution and also always say, you really only with SureShield need to conduct one of these. We do help do all what we call the crosswalking of this data to the relevant control frameworks. Most importantly, today you need to meet the NIST 800-171 requirements. However, the CMMC level 2 map directly to those same requirement controls. The only changes that they have made are the ID number for those, basically with those, and a little bit of a difference in terms of the answers. However, those answers map directly. You basically have 4 answers, whether you're compliant, whether you're not compliant, whether you're putting it on a plan of action to be compliant, or whether it's something that doesn't apply to your organization. And in all of those cases, you need to be able to back up with evidence to support your answer to those questions. So we provide a very easy mechanism for your organization to actually filter through this data to help you attack and go at these particular questions. You'll also note, for instance, because CMMC actually has different levels associated with it, if I wanted to just, for instance, look at the CMMC level 1 controls, these are what they call the basic 17 levels of hygiene controls. You could start there, conduct those, and then move on to what would be the level 2 requirements. But for purposes of going into this, I'm going to just go to NIST. And I might want to just look at, say, the access related or the audit and accountability controls. It's that easy to actually go in and look at the different requirements. It will show you what those IDs are, what the standard is, what the domain is that it belongs to, the rating for that particular area. And then within here, what the current responses are to these questions. And at any point in time, if I want to go in and look at those questions or begin to conduct those questions, I simply click on that hyperlink. And it will take me directly to, 1, the definition of that control, the appropriate responses to that particular control, and more importantly, again, areas that allow me to provide updated comments as to how I'm meeting those. Keep in mind, again, we are what we call a continuous monitoring solution. For those who indicated, again, you need to be coming back on a regular basis and looking and seeing where you're at. So we will, as you are updating and making improvements or addressing particular performance areas, our system will collect all that history and always show you at a point in time where you stand. You can even look over time of how you've improved over time with that. There's an area to upload the evidence to support your answers to that control. We provide, as part of what we call our compliance solution, a compliance scan. As we get into the Q&A, Chandi will explain that to you a little bit more, but it basically scans certain areas within your network and can provide what we call evidence sheets to support your answers to those particular controls. We also, and this has been very useful for not only our partners who use this, but our direct customers, a lot of knowledge, what we call a knowledge base that helps you understand how to address and answer this question. So those include best practices, guidelines on how to implement these controls. As I mentioned, the policies and procedures, which we'll come back to, evidences that may be required to support this, and then really even questions that you could ask within your environment to help better understand how to answer this question as being implemented or not. And then there's a variety of different ways to navigate through the system to conduct and answer questions. Given that this is a continuous tool, unlike some other products that are out there, you don't have to answer every single question in order to see where you stand at a given point in time. So I'm going to just go into briefly, once you've gone through those questions, the kind of reports that get automated out of this system. So I'm going to go to a ComplyShield report. And beyond what we would call the standard compliance reporting, where you can run reports on compliance, you can run executive reports on compliance, you can look at trends. Again, for the purposes of NIST and CMMC, we also provide all the what we call the DFARS reporting documents. And that includes your report on your 800-171 assessment score. So we will take the answers that we have, and knowing the algorithms in the background, we can compute your particular assessment score. And this is what needs to be, again, submitted to the SPRS. If I were to go and change any questions, for instance, something that hasn't been implemented that now has been implemented, this will automatically update that particular score. We have additionally the system security plan. So the whole entire system security plan can get automated in here as well. This is another component of what you need to do in order to submit this data to the SPRS. And that will include things, for instance, like your network diagrams, the architecture, the system boundary diagrams that have to be provided here. And then as you get down into what we call the practices, this is pulling all the data from your assessment score and brings that in to show what's been implemented, what hasn't, and then comments in terms of how you're going to get those all in place. Our customers have really found this to be supremely and really useful and efficient and cost effective for them to not have to go back and recreate these kind of documents in a what I would call a manual basis. Let me touch briefly, as I mentioned as well, on the policies. So within this, we also provide you, as we mentioned, with policies. So you can also look at your compliance and your process for looking at your compliance from a policy perspective once you've begun to conduct and answer questions. All right. So in this case, I'm pulling up the NIST related policies. It shows me those 14 different policies that relate to those 110 different controls. You can see in terms of the visual, there are 22 controls that relate to this access control policy. And right now we have deemed this policy not being compliant because we can see that there's one of these controls that has not either been answered or it's deemed non-compliant. Again, to very quickly get to that, it's as simple as just clicking on that particular area and taking me directly to that particular questions where I can address that and say, oh, in this case, we're addressing this with the system security plan and the POA&M. Now, maybe I've already updated that and put that in place. I could come in then and change that score. At the policy level, again, when you have our tools turned on, we can provide you with these templated policies that are basically customized to your organization. You can come in, look at these policies, modify them specifically to what is germane to your environment. You can upload your own policies. You can edit these policies. It's really giving, again, some additional help in helping make sure that you have all the tools in place to meet those requirements. And again, mapped to all the particular controls. So that is what we call the compliance or the ComplyShield parts. We have lots and lots of our customers that have chosen to, first of all, try this out, and then have implemented this to really help them have good tools and easy tools to help meet these ongoing requirements that we know are required today and coming in the future. I'll briefly touch on what we call the vulnerability tools as well. Now, some of you may have managed service providers that are doing your IT assessment or doing your IT services for you. I would encourage you to make sure, if that is the case, that you're asking them if they are doing vulnerability scans on your environment. They should be, and it is a requirement under NIST and CMMC. If you have some of your own internal resources as well, we have what we call vulnerability scanning tools. It's provided through one of our partners that was deemed to be actually one of the top 10 vulnerability assessment organizations. We have basically, I would say, put tools on top of that to make it very easy to implement, to not have to have it, brought into a facility, to installed within your organization. It can basically be deployed through the cloud. And what it does is it goes out and it scans your environment. It first of all takes a look and it determines all the assets that are in your environment, assets being computers, servers, printers, and the likes. And then it scans those and helps stratify the risk of any vulnerabilities you may have. Those could be software updates that have not yet been implemented. It could be new items that you need to put in place. So they basically will help, first of all, scan that environment, stratify the risk of those vulnerabilities. So I just clicked into this, and let's say I wanted to look at what I might call the most highly critical issues that I have within here. And at any given point in time, I can go in this case, I'm looking at from what I would call a host or an asset level, and it will run and show me if I've run things over time. Because you can run these on a continuous regular basis, it's showing me what the risk profile of this has been over time, what it is today, what the vulnerabilities are, and more importantly, how do I go about remediating these particular issues. So we provide guidance on how to go in and actually take care of those particular vulnerabilities, and then allow you again to run those scans to see what impact it's had on reducing your risk profile. So this is at more of a what I would call micro level. Obviously, within your organization, you'll have people that will help you do this, but you would want to take a look at what does this mean to me, again, from what I would call a more macro perspective. So again, with tools like this, I can run reports that say, for instance, show me my top remediations. If I were to implement, say, my top 20 remediations, what impact would that have on my overall risk? And again, not only is this very important for actually protecting your environment, but by running this and doing these types of processes, you're also meeting the compliance requirements under NIST and CMMC. So in this case, you can see it's bringing me a top 20 remediation report. It's telling me if I were to apply these top 20 remediations, what would they be applied to? What impact would it have on the vulnerabilities? And what impact would it have on my overall risk profile? So really helping you look at what some of those most critical aspects are, what needs to be done. It will even show you kind of a time series of what impact it has as you do or remediate these different solutions. It will even give me some what I would call time factors about how much time it will take in order to do this. And those are more based upon if you were to do them one by one. If you have what they call RRM tools, you can make these processes very quick to remediate these particular types of issues. Lastly, just briefly, I will touch on one other solution that we have in place that actually goes out, as I mentioned, and can help identify, first of all, what we would call that sensitive data in your environment. And in this case, obviously under CMMC and NIST, it's that CUI data. So we have a endpoint solution that can go out and identify on your endpoints what type of critical data may be residing and where it resides. So in this case, you can see beyond CMMC related data, I could have credit card data. I wanted to look for PHI data. But if I were to just break that down and say, just show me the CMMC related data, then I will know where that resides. I can take actions in terms of making sure that I am, for instance, cordoning off this data. And then it also allows me to set parameters or rules on how that data can move within my organization. There are people within your group that will need to have access to this information, and we don't want to restrict them from that, but we also want to prevent the movement of that data going to places that it should not go. So again, it can help prevent that critical CUI data from moving out to areas that it should not, and again, help meet the particular requirements that you have for meeting these particular CMC and NIST related controls. So that are the solutions that we provide to help meet these particular requirements. They really help keep the cost of that down low. Again, if you have not conducted these assessments, you need to at least be planning to do so, and you're going to see more need and requirement to do so. We can provide you and help you with solutions and tools to meet those requirements. So with that, I'm going to pause and open it up for any questions that you all may have. And while we are doing that, we will also open it up. We have lots of folks that are interested in actually trialing these tools. So we make them available to you to test out, first of all, for yourself. And if you are so inclined and find that it's something that's going to be beneficial and useful to you to continue to work with, then after that trial period, we feel we have some very nominal fees associated for utilizing the software. So I've opened up that trial offer poll. If you are interested, please go in and indicate what it is that you might be interested in trying out. And again, if you're interested in perhaps maybe later, we will get back to you and keep you informed of that. So I'm opening up that particular, we'll continue to keep the poll open, but why don't we go ahead and take any questions that you may have. If you could go into the Q&A section of this, you should see within there, you can go ahead and direct any questions you may have in terms of the presentation or any questions you have as it relates to issues you may have today or how questions about the process that we have here, the current process and where they're at with it today. And it looks like some of the questions have already been, there's a few that have already been asked. And I see Chandi, I believe you've gone ahead on in and you've helped answer those questions for them. So I see 4 or 5 questions that have already been asked and answered. And please direct any more that you may have. And let me see. And so there is a question here, and Chandi, if you can type in the answer, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it live as well. Does NIST 800-170 itself require filing with SPRS? If you are a Department of Defense provider, you are a contractor that is contracted in either as a contractor or a subcontractor to the DoD, then the answer is yes, you need to submit that NIST 800-171 score to the SPRS. And I hope I've answered that question correctly. And I see we have a couple of questions on costing. Just we can get into that in more detail, after the presentation. But just to give you an idea, for the compliance assessment, we provide both CMMC and NIST. We consider those one framework. There is a a fee for access to those compliance audits. It's very, it's in the low thousands area. So it's very, very cost effective. It can be paid on a monthly basis. Things like your vulnerability scans and your CUI data loss protection tools are based upon really roughly the number of assets that are being scanned within that environment. So there will be some variability based upon the number of assets, but it's a monthly fee and it's only charged when and if you actually run those scans. So if you had opted, for instance, to do a scan every other month, you would only be charged within the month that you've run that scan. And actually during the course of that month, you can run those scans as often as you like. And I know we're out a little bit ahead of schedule. I continue to have the trial offer open. I see a number of you have indicated interest in trying these out. So for those of you that have indicated yes, please keep an eye out. Everybody will receive a follow-up email with access to the content of this presentation, as well as the webinar information. You will also, if you've answered yes, you will have an opportunity in there to actually set up a time for someone from SureShield to contact you to get that trial started for you at your convenience. So please keep an eye out for that. Pick a time that works convenient for you, and we will be back in touch with you to get that started. Any other questions? I know we're, again, a little bit ahead of schedule, so I hope we've bought you back some time. And if not, again, keep your eyes out for a follow-up message from SureShield, information on the content of the presentation. And again, if you haven't answered in the poll and you're interested in a later time frame, please feel free to reach out to us. We are more than happy to help you get set up to test out these tools. And again, hope that we can help you in meeting the requirements you have in a cost-effective manner. And, most importantly, helping protect the security of your business and of the organization, the Department of Defense that you are working with. So with that, if there are no more questions, we will go ahead and stop the presentation and conclude the session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And for those of you that have expressed interest, we will be following up with you here shortly. Thank you again.